The chair is occupied, so I don't know if she's gonna get annoyed with me halfway or if she'll deal with it. Oh, she's getting up. Anyway, yesterday I made a video without planning what I was gonna talk about, and it kind of went better than I expected. So I figure I would do it again. So I don't have a plan for what this video is, but now that I started recording, the thing that's coming to my mind is thinking and talking about your feelings in public, and dealing with what's going on in your life in public. Meaning, whether it's vlogging, tweeting, blogging, even being like a journalist, like an opinions columnist or lifestyle columnist. I remember they used to be in national newspapers in Singapore. I think there still is. There's like a lifestyle section, and people just write about their personal problems. There was this journalist. She's still around. Her name is Sumiko Tan, and she used to write a column every week or so about like her oven or her dating life and whatnot. And I think she even compiled those columns into a book. And there's a part of me that's always liked that stuff in general. So I'm not a fan of Sumiko Tan, but I've always, when I was a teenager, I used to skip school with the intent of doing my homework, of catching up on my homework. What I would do is I'll skip school, I would go to the library. Specifically, I would go to the Esplanade Library in Singapore, which is like just the bus that I would take to go to school, and then I would swap buses and go to town. And it was just my favorite place to be when I was skipping school. And I'd be alone, and and the library would only open at about 10 a.m. So I guess I would stay up late at night, and I would wake up groggy because I didn't get enough sleep, and then I would sleep on the bus to the Esplanade. And then if my mom is watching this, she'll now know. Well, I can talk to her about it. It's been so many years, but yeah, I would sleep on the bus, and then I would get to the Esplanade. Anyways, but not very important details. Point is, I would go to the library and I would pick up old magazines by the stack. I would pick up like a dozen copies of Esquire, GQ, Men's Health, even women's magazines, just a bunch of magazines, whatever I could find, right? Newspapers, the New York Times. At that time, I did not have a smartphones didn't exist yet, right? Like 2003, 2004. So I was a heavy internet user, but I didn't have a smartphone, and so just media consumption habits were different at the time. And so I was very into magazines at that point, and a part of me wanted to write for a magazine, or some had a fantasy of maybe someday starting my own magazine, which I think I still care about in a certain sense. So I'm not particularly attached to the form, but I would, so once I'm done with my current book, I'm gonna pay people to write blog posts or to write research articles about whatever I think is good and interesting and useful, particularly like historical research and scenes and stuff. But it's not that. Where am I going with that? Well, I just like reading people's thoughts. I like reading, right? In general, I like fiction, I like non-fiction, but I think I also especially am curious about like contemporary life, like what people are dealing with. And you could even say that if you read something like Lord of the Rings, right, it was a product of its time, right? I recently watched Wrinkle in Time, which I'm writing a review about that I haven't finished. And the interesting thing about Wrinkle in Time, the book that I think wasn't captured in the movie as much, and maybe by choice, I don't know, is that the original Wrinkle in Time was written like during the Cold War, basically, right? And you could see that Kamazots, was like a representation of Soviet command control economies and that sort of collectivist totalitarian mindset. And where am I going with that? The point is that it's interesting and useful to see people discuss ideas, and because of how it relates, I mean, for its own sake, but also how it relates to your own life. And I like it when people share their thoughts and their feelings, and I realize that I'm a bit of an outlier on this. Like, it's not a universal thing, and I'm kind of inching my way up to something that I might not fully capture in this video. But I feel that I have a higher than average interest in this public life, political life, whatever you call it. People like there are, so on the flip side, there are people who don't like to be public, who don't care to read these things. Don't get excited about spending all day at a library, and I wonder how much of it is personality, like just you're born a certain way. How much of it is upbringing and context? You have a certain skin color, certain gender expression, certain. I have found that I relate a lot to trans women, particularly online, and even though I'm a straight cis man, I don't have any like confusion about my sexuality or my gender, but I think I have like a cultural sense that I'm not normal, or I don't belong, or I'm deviant in some way. And there's like some kind of deviance that, if you're serious about living with the condition of being deviant psychologically, or whatever, then you need to understand yourself and you need to understand other people. And you can only understand either yourself or other people in by studying both, like in relation to both things. And the way, and like you can't take things for granted. You can't make assumptions. You can't assume that what's true for you is true for the people around you. And if you do that, you're gonna experience pain and difficulty, right? So you need to make sense of yourself. You need public discourse. You need to interface with reality. Some people will say, oh, just talk to your family. That assumes a bunch of things about your family. It assumes that your family is capable of having those conversations with you. And I would say that no matter how understanding your family is, they are still your family. So like Jane Jacobs, in her book The Death and Life of Great American Cities, she made a really important point, I think, that it's important for children to interact with adults who have nothing to do with them. Right? So like, if you can't just use parents, you can't just use siblings, you can't just use teachers, right? You can't hire a nanny or a piano teacher or whatever, because all of those adults in that child's life are, the relationship that they have with that child is conditional on that sort of context. And so there's nothing that you can have a great uncle. It's better to have a great uncle than to not have a great uncle. But a great uncle cannot be a substitute for the public, right? Like no matter how much your parents love you and your uncle loves you, you can't that can't replace that can't you might not feel that the world is a welcoming place outside of your narrow small family cluster, right? Or yeah, your teacher cares about you, but that's because they are your teacher. How do strangers feel about you? How does the world feel about you? How does humanity feel about you? I think these are important questions, especially if you're deviant, especially if you don't feel like you can rely on your pre-existing cluster and your pre-existing inherited context to take care of you. And so I think it is necessary that there be space in public where people can say what they think, say what they believe, even if they're wrong, share their feelings. And I'm not gonna get involved in the specifics of any one particular utterance, or the pushback to that or whatever. I will just do my part, which is to continue to share my own stories, continue to talk about other people's, my interpretations of things that are going on. Again, there's this, like, everything's so overlapped and interrelated and whatnot. But I guess this is my roundabout way of saying I believe that there is such a thing as a public commons, and that public commons are important. We can't just leave everything up to private families and private, communities. Like why is a cult bad, right? Like when you think of a bad cult, like a Jonestown or whatever, it takes a bunch of people and it extracts them from their community and from their society, and it implants them in this new environment where you can't get away from it. You're isolated, and the leader is unquestionable in their authority, and so on and so forth. And it's the lack of a public that makes whatever bad shit happen continue to keep happening. There's no dissent, there's no friction, there's no it's just if anything goes bad, it goes really, really bad. And so I believe that it is necessary that we have at least some people, and we do, right? But I think we can do better. We have at least some people who care about the state of the public commons, who, and I always, the metaphor I always use, no, it's not even a metaphor, it's the truth. The thing that I always think about are the kids who don't have good families, who don't have good teachers, who basically have to be raised by the public commons and by the libraries. And if we don't care about these kids, they will become some of the worst elements of our society. There's this apocryphal African proverb that's something like, a child that does not feel the warmth of the love of his village will a child who is not loved by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth, something like that. And I think it's true. I think there's a truth to that. And I think it's important that we have spaces that people can talk, right? We need to know what people think. We can't rely too much on intermediaries, although to some degree we have no choice. But I just think it's important that there are people who are talking, and it's not just and people who are talking for the sake of it, like not because they have something to sell you, not because they have some agenda, not because they have, if all the decent mid-tier good people leave, then we are left with the radicals and the loonies, and it's just not healthy. And yeah, I'm kind of circling around, but I want to end this here, and I just want to say, I guess I want to end this. I want to encourage anybody who feels that they would like to participate in the public comments, but feels like, oh, my perspective is so moderate, I'm so boring, I don't really have anything interesting to say. Like, you might not be a spectacular shining star by yourself, but even the boring and moderate and casual voices are very important, because they fulfill an important role in the body of society, right? And we need decent folks everywhere, right? In gas stations and in on public transport, and just at the bus stop, whatever. It's like these little interactions, they add up to be society, right? And we all affect everyone else. I'll end it here. Done.